Hey there, welcome to episode number 47 of the Changemakers podcast. I'm Dave Corlett, I'm the business director at the creative agency Shaped By, and the Changemakers is our podcast that's all about creativity in B2B. This episode is a conversation between myself and the creative director at Fivetran, Vincent Sacco. Now, as soon as Vincent starts talking, you'll see he's such a great guy. Really, really great guest to have on the podcast. I've been speaking to Vincent for some time now about making this happen. I know he's been a fan of the pod in the past and some of our other events as well. So it's really, really great to have Vincent on the podcast. But what I wanted to talk to Vincent about in this conversation is something that I know he's really, really passionate about because he's very, very good at it. Now, Fivetran, when he first joined, were very much in their infancy. They're quite a niche business. I'm going to try and explain what they do, but I certainly am not an expert in any way whatsoever. They basically help businesses to automate their data pipelines to extract and load their raw data into data warehouses, data lake houses. I mean, even you can tell I'm getting a bit uncomfortable out of my depth here, to be honest with you, but that's essentially what they do. Now, businesses like Fivetran typically, and I'm generalizing a little bit here, but typically start very, very product orientated. They have an amazing product. Certainly in case of Fivetran, that's exactly what they had. Quite revolutionary in those early days of storing, managing data. They grow because people like the product. They get to a certain point and competitors catch up. The landscape changes. They're more mature businesses and they basically need a brand. They need a brand identity, they need cohesion within their brand, and they need a future-proof, a moat, as it were, to help them future-proof their business and prepare it for growth, become favorable, become consistent in the minds of the people that they're trying to influence, particularly their core audience. Essentially all the reasons why companies need brands. What Vincent specializes in doing is coming in and building that infrastructure and the foundation for businesses like Fivetran to have that infrastructure. Essentially when the product stops selling itself, marketing needs to turn on. How does that infrastructure manifest itself in terms of creative output, brand, all of those different things? So that's something that I really, really wanted to dive into with Vincent because for a start, he doesn't come from that world necessarily. As you'll hear, his background is in food trucks and murals. That's essentially how he got into the tech industry. He found this niche and now he's exploiting it to great effect to Fivetran's benefit, and other businesses as well. Fivetran's not his first rodeo, as you'll hear. So I'm really excited to bring this conversation to you because Vincent, as I said, is an amazing guy. He's got some amazing stories and some amazing insights about how this all works in practice. So without further ado, here we go. This is episode number 47 of The Changemakers with Vincent Sacco, the creative director at Fivetran. I really, really hope you enjoy it. Vincent, hey, welcome to The Changemakers. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me, Dave.
Good. And thank you for joining me on the eve of what seems like quite a big holiday, quite a big vacation. I know that's probably something that you'll have one eye on. But lots and lots of exciting things going on at Fivetran in the meantime. So I'm sure you've been pretty busy in the weeks and months leading up to that, which I'd love to touch on as we go through this conversation. I know we've got a big chat about brand, about specifically building brands at companies that didn't have brands before, or maybe not so much, which I really, really want to get into with you. But before we do all that, it'd be really, really interesting for our listeners to get a bit of a sense of your career so far and how you ended up where you are now, which is leading the creative side of things at Fivetran. And also a bit of insight into Fivetran as well, just in case our listeners don't know you guys.
Sure. I've been at Fivetran for almost 3.5 years now, and it's an interesting trajectory. I started working in, I think in most of my 20s, I was just bartending and being a waiter and branding all of the bars and restaurants I ever worked at, and just have slowly just built on top of that my whole career. From there, I went on to working at a company called Off the Grid. I'm not sure, there's no world you would understand that being in the being in the UK, but in San Francisco, it was like the birth of the food truck movement. And
Okay.
um, it was wild because that's where it kind of all started. I was doing brands of this event and then doing the brands of the food trucks and the events. And, you know, there's nothing you learn more about UX than like watching people interact with food trucks and watching them all bottleneck at the front three and watching the back 28 not get any, and then changing the layouts the following week to make sure that like, okay, you see that the people got through the first, 10 this time, but they still, so it's, um, and yeah, ended up working there. And next thing you know, I was there for 4 years. I tried to like eat, pray, love my way through the tech industry by painting murals in lobbies. That was what I was hoping to do, and get paid for it because I thought that there was a big market for it. And I ended up working at this food truck company. I ended up building a brand. I built a brand team. Next thing I know, I started working at a company called Blend because I was brought in to do their illustrations and such. But I had all this experience with building brand teams. So that's how I got into the tech world, is that I tried to bring fun, like life and personality to a company that was a white label mortgage solution. So it was like the company behind multiple layers of companies that do things. And that's how it started. It was a product that was taking off. It was right in the middle of that hockey stick kind of growth. On my fourth day, they announced $100 million funding, and it's like off to the races. And we had to create a brand to support this company as it already somewhat found market fit. So it was just kind of selling based on what it served as a product. But then we had to figure out a way to sell that, put a brand to this, and just continue to keep that ball moving. That's where that's the skill that I've suddenly been able to do, right? I see that a product is selling. Now the brand needs to catch up when the marketing team and the sales team have to kind of catch up to that. So I went from there to a company called One, which was acquired by Walmart. And then that was a grind. It was an experience like I've never had to start from scratch to the big leagues. And then I've been at Fivetran for 3.5 years. We're a data management platform. We move all of your data. So it's been a really exciting like growth because let's say 3 years ago, data movement became essential to a lot of companies, and they started to look for solutions that were outside of their teams building pipelines themselves. They found Fivetran as this viable solution, and it kind of started as a tool, and it exploded. I mean, the growth of the company from when I started at around, I think, like employee like four or something, and here we are at 1,300.
Wow.
Or don't quote me on that. I think it's 1,100. I think, I don't know. I can give you the official number, but
That's still quite a jump.
yeah. I mean, it's doubled. It's doubled in size, almost tripled. We've had an acquisition. We acquired an enterprise HVR, um, and so now we kind of have that full stack. And it's been a really interesting and exciting growth because I've had to create a brand with me and my team. We've been small but mighty, and kind of keep up with this growth. Um, the industry is changing every 6 months. Our Us being at the forefront of something becomes table stakes 6 months later. And from a brand perspective, we have to make sure that we're like being able to tell the story, predict kind of where we want to be positioned 6 months in the future. You know,
Mm.
if you go
Yeah.
through the history of our, oh, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say it's super interesting. I think that this, technology's never moved faster, but there's so
Yeah,
many categories. You can say that on a broad level, but there's so many categories like yours. We're seeing it a lot at the moment with AI, the kind of almost like wild west
Yeah.
of AI, where things move at the speed of light, but you don't always appreciate that somewhere there's a creative team battling to try and get some consistency into their brand, but also keep it moving. I actually had a question. So you mentioned that at Blend, you stepped in there, had product market fit, but no brand. Was it the same at Fivetran when you got there?
Ish, right? Like, I think Fivetran at the time was positioned as a tool and an alternative solution. At the time, Fivetran is like, this is this great thing, but people wanted to take it. It was people taking a gamble. We didn't really quite have as much enterprise or bigger logos buying into our offering. So the positioning was, here's this cool tool for data engineers, and that is exciting, and it did the job. And so it was plug and play, do the thing, move on, and the brand reflected that. It was playful. It was a lot more brighter colors. We had a lot of illustrations, and at that time at the maturity of Fivetran, like that was appropriate. When I came on, we were probably 6 months, maybe almost a year past that, but the visuals were still lingering. And I think every now and again you'll see like a 404 page, like a Memphis design cowboy riding a horse or something. But like, well, we had to elevate the brand real quick, and it was systematically like, how can we make sure that we are doing that across all touch points? And that was the first main tab. That was the first big job on my shoulders.
Because that's what I was going to say, actually. So when you're in a situation like that, when you come in, there's a lot of work to do. It's not where it should be, and actually that if you don't do that work, the product isn't going to sell itself forever. You need
Yeah.
you need to remove that friction. You need that moat, I suppose, of the brand. What's the first thing that you typically do in those situations? What's the first thing you say, right, this is what needs to happen right now?
There's a few things that need to happen right now, but my kind of partner on the brand team, Michelle Wan, she was with me at Blend as well. She came with me. She's a brilliant designer, an amazing people person, and there is a level of that that's super important at that stage, because you have to remember, at these kind of hockey stick growth companies, the reason they're at where they're at is because there is like an army of cowboys who are going out doing their own thing, and because they've been doing their own thing, it's been celebrated. They're getting the deals, they're getting the sales, they're using unconventional ways. And first task when you show up is, you got to bring them into the fold of, first and foremost, consistency. Like, this is our messaging, this is our visual, this is our style, this is what we're going to say. Like, let's just, you have to understand, like, you have to convince them that they understand that value. And that's really hard without that people person. Like, I can give a style guide all day. How many PDFs have you sent that never have even been opened? Right? Like, this is where, like I said, Michelle is been like, there is that hand holding of the value of brand at that early days, that you identify those people that are going to be the cheerleaders of the brand team, be the cheerleaders be the cheerleaders of consistency. And you get them on your side and you teach them how to do this, and they understand the value, and they see that this makes them more efficient. They see that it makes them faster, and it shows that they understand they're getting the tools they need to get their messaging better, et cetera, et cetera. All the good old fashioned business stuff. And that's step one. You got to get everyone marching the same beat and understand the value of brand. And then only then you can build on top of it. I'd like to say it's like a 2-month endeavor, but that really is a year and a half.
Well, where'd you get a year and a half from in tech?
Yeah, you kind of, it's kind of like when you see one of those like baseball stadiums being built where like they keep playing in one while the other one's building to the side of it. Like, that's the way you got to do it. You got to like forecast where you're going to be in a year, build a brand for that while like plugging the holes on the other side. It's hard.
Yeah, I'll tell you one thing that I saw today on LinkedIn. Shout out to Anna at Quinix on the brand team there. She said that she there's this thing around being the brand police, so to speak, that's often
Hmm.
quite a negative connotation. But over there, she really sees it as a positive when someone kind of sends her a little message on her team saying, "Hey, brand police, I just wanted to check this or I just wanted to check that," because it shows that they've put the work in to make sure that people actually care about how they represent the brand. Is that kind of what you're alluding to here? Where that's the kind of holy grail of what you want to get to with your team?
Yeah, that's where we're at. We have people on every corner of the company, whether it's in, obviously sales and marketing, but internal communications, leadership decks, that they come to us and really want to make sure that they're on that tone. And don't get me wrong, like when there's a lot, I mean, global brand, multiple offices, like things are going to slip through, and it's almost more exciting than not when you see something totally like it's like watching like it's like seeing like like a knockoff Hello Kitty shirt somewhere. You just would be like, oh wow, like that we would have never done. You know what I mean? Like, and like we enjoy it, but we see far less and less of that now than ever before, which is good. You know, it's hard though.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, especially as a business scales like that. A question I had as well, kind of on the similar theme to where you first start when you get into those situations. There's a lot of work to do, but the I suppose the reason for doing that is is really really important because
Hmm.
you know as we see in so many categories with so many businesses and we've seen it play out in real time sometimes when you don't have that moat of a brand, when you don't have that protective layer of a recognizable, distinct, consistent brand, and product and sales start plateauing and sales start falling because that initial growth is so hard to maintain. Um, you might start losing share to competitors that have maybe built something similar but do have a brand to back it up. So all of a sudden, you're not on those day one lists. You're not building that kind of mental consideration to people out of market. How do you build out, from your point of view and your team's point of view, how do you build out a kind of infrastructure that future proofs that business? And when marketing really has to turn on, everything's ready to go.
I think the first thing you do is you have to look around the landscape and see where the strengths are, right? Like I've been I've been on the frustrating side of things, and this is more in my junior years where it's like I have an idea of what this needs to be, and you try to force everyone to go there. And you're just never going to get it if you don't have buy-in, right? And we don't have time to give everyone buy-in. Like we can rebrand and tell everyone to do that. And like there's a point there's very few moments in a company's growth where like you have those windows where a rebrand will be as impactful, right? But in the case of Fivetran, we were a thought leader in the space. We had all we had a PMM team of 27 people, if I remember correctly, who were all writing their own blogs. And so I we looked at that and we saw that there are these backbones of our business that we can leverage as brand. Like we can turn those into brand moments. So we just doubled down on the philosophy that Fivetran's a tool. If a tool is going to be trusted by the user of a tool, it has to be well crafted. And if you're going to be the arbiter of a well crafted tool, that means that you have to showcase that you know what you're doing. And we just leaned into that as much as we can. So our blogs, we created a bespoke illustration and graphic for every single one of our blog posts. At the time, we were producing like 5 to 20 a week. That's a lot of bespoke illustrations, but that became kind of the cornerstone because we were telling very informative stories to people who cared, and we were putting that effort into the way they appeared. it sounds like a small thing, but that's influenced really the brand we are today from a visual perspective and some of our storytelling perspective, because we try to showcase that we are well built, we are well crafted at every touch point. And so we can be clever and all those things, and that all came later. But really, like consistency, well built, strong systems, and people who know what they're talking about behind that is the brand. And it has had to be, because that's the only tools we had at our disposal at the time.
Mm. Um, do so. Fivetran obviously very specifically geared towards engineers, developers. Do you feel that because I hear this quite a lot, which is it's a really hard audience to market to. You know, they're really savvy. They'll see through certain things. Do you think they care about brand, or is it the case that it's? I suppose what I'm trying to say is the product is obviously intrinsic. The product and brand go so hand in hand to a well-crafted Fivetran brand that essentially that's the way to their heart.
This is going to maybe be a little like self-indulgent, but like I look at anyone who we're selling, like I said, we're selling a tool, and I market them the same way I would to a designer. Like this is a tinkerer, even at the C-suite. This is somebody who loves problems and loves solving problems. They want to hear problems and they want to see how somebody else solved them, and they want to see in the weeds how they did it, and they want to have a huh moment. It's like that's what I've always tried to create. Like we can do best color system, like design systems and color, and we can do all those things, and we do, and we're meticulous about it. But like that's what they care about. If you as a brand can just consistently show that you are solving problems and like kind of showcase that in your messaging and interact with your customers in a problem solutions basis, like that's what they care about. That's what I care about, you know?
Yeah, and is there a certain reliance? I suppose I was thinking about this recently, actually. So one thing I was thinking about in terms of the value of brand, the intrinsic value of brand, to especially to startups and scale ups, is you know if you go if you kind of start selling before you've got a brand, that's okay. You know, you can do that. But again, you get to the point where brand becomes important. So, you know, it's almost like brand before sales would help. You know, brand before marketing would help because, you know, you need that backbone to fall back on. But brand before product, you have to do the two things hand in hand because ultimately you can't be
Yeah.
making promises at a brand level that the product can't deliver on. So I suppose what I'm really trying to say is, do you work really closely with that PMM team to kind of make sure that brand and product go hand in hand at all times?
Yeah. I mean, our brand and PMM team is a little like um in a lot of ways like a conjoined twin. I mean, like the head of the PMM team, Kat Ridgetana, who's the most one of the most fabulous partners I've ever worked with. Um, we have we had a point in the company about I want to say about a year and a half ago, almost two, where our head of marketing left, and our head of design left, and at that time we were partnered with product design. We were separate from marketing,
Mm-hmm.
and it just became very clear that it's not that we were like rudderless, but we had to partner with PMM to really like make sure that things weren't going to fall off. And so me and Kat made this effort to make sure that the brand and the product marketing were just as tight as we possibly could be. And I think it's really benefited in every possible way. The messaging, the story, the way we're invested in it. Brand has a seat. Brand design. We have a seat at the table in every every way we position the product. It's amazing. It's the only place we want to be, right? Like nobody wants to be a ticket taker.
Yeah, 100%. And so it's a theme I want to touch on actually, because I think this is super important when we get into these conversations about brand specifically, especially at businesses like Fivetran, like some of the most pioneering tech companies out there. It's super important to work with your colleagues cross-functionally, bring
Mm-hmm.
people on that brand journey with you. Obviously, you're the arbiters of the brand, you're the experts. But brand is the one thing, in the business that touches everybody. Everybody has a stake in it. Everybody's responsible for it. What's your kind of process? What's your way of collaborating, not just with the product marketing team, but with anyone across the business that you need to, right their way up to the C-suite as well, to make sure that they kind of they share your vision, I suppose. They understand what's happening here. They understand the value of what's happening here and why it's happening, why it's important to the future of the business.
I think it's I don't I don't look at it that I am selling them my vision. Think the most important thing to do is to make sure that their vision, their input is so considered, and you as a brand team are able to understand the nuances of what they need, what they feel is most important. And then you repackage that and give it back to them and make it feel like it's their idea. Like it's kind of a bit of a crass way to say it, but like it is it. I mean, like you said, I mean, the brand is everyone's, right? And if everyone feels like it's theirs, it will grow and it will organically strengthen. And when everyone is invested in it, it just gets bigger and better over time. If I were to go to my C-suite and say, this is what we're doing, and they disagree, like maybe they'll come around and that's happened. But hopefully it's going to be like, remember those things that you think are really important? Here's how we manifested that. And this is how it's going to touch the business. And these are the areas it's going to seep into. Isn't that exciting? Hopefully they say, that is exciting. And then it moves on. Um, the relationship part is getting people, maybe this is just the bartender in me, getting people comfortable to express what they think is important about their brand and their business in a way that's almost candid and that's genuine. Because if you can get the decision makers at a company to speak candidly and genuine about the brand, about what they think the company is, and they've thought about it, that's the most important thing. If they've never thought about it, you're kind of screwed. But if they have a strong opinion that can be held, and then you take that and you sit with it and you nourish it and you see how it affects the marketing and sales and product, and you bring it back to everyone and you say, I've collected the information, here's what I think we should be doing, and they all have to buy in. That's the personal connection that's super important. You're turning their ideas into a reality, and everyone wants that, right? That was long-winded, I apologize.
No, that's absolutely perfect. I think that's such a good perspective, and I think that's such a really nice way, not just of framing it, but of going about it. Because I think there are a couple of things you said there where you actually took brand out of the conversation. What's your view on the company? How should the company be doing this? How should we be expressing this as a business? Not kind of, because I think sometimes what we get hung up on a little bit too much in these kind of conversations is they don't understand brand. We need to teach them what brand is. What does brand mean? Which for a start is if you asked 10 people in our industry, even 10 brand leaders, 10 creative leaders, what's your definition of brand, that you get 10 different answers. So there's that to contend with as well. Maybe we don't really know necessarily or have it kind of locked down, but I really like that idea. And also something you said there about getting people excited, would this excite you? Is that something, because you mentioned specifically about that's a conversation that you'd have with the C-suite. Is that the way that you would engage the C-suite specifically? Do you have different kind of hooks, I suppose, to try and engage certain teams, or is that excitement always part of the conversation? And actually, this is a two-pronged question. What number one
Sure.
is excite the way that you tend to go, and number two, in terms of C-suites, is there a specific way that you found to engage them that works?
All C-suites are different. So you kind of have to work, you have to, like I said, you have to know your audience just like anything else. Excitement has always been just the lever I pull. It's because usually I love this stuff. I'm writing scripts right now. I was up until midnight last night writing a script, enjoying every minute, drawings. Like, I'm a compulsive problem solver. I love the idea of being creative. B2B gives you an opportunity to do that. So I get excited. Um, so I usually try to package my own excitement and like share it to other people. Various degree of work, but when it works, it works. Like when I'm like, hey, here's that thing you said. I took it. I was so inspired by the thing you said, and I like turned it into this. And then they go, that is everything I ever thought it could be and more. And you're like, yes. And you high five and go get drinks afterwards. Like that is the ideal scenario. It doesn't always happen that way, but that's the ideal scenario. I try to take that to the C-suite. You get them excited about things. It makes things easier. But you know, we did an announcement a couple months back at Snowflake Summit about data lakes. And like we've had a really polished, structured brand for the past year and a half. We've had some really great stuff, and we've started to teeter into clever. We started to teeter a tad into fun. Um, and on every document we've ever written about the brand, doesn't really those aren't words we'd ever say. But like everyone internally, it, anything that's fun and clever, like is used, and they feel compelled to tell that story. And that puts us at a crossroad as a brand team, right? Because you're like, well, we've created something in a very specific way and we want it to be used a certain way, but like people are finding this other way to use it. Let's just start to dabble into this world. So like we launched data lakes as a product, and we started to like incorporate this little duck jumping off like a diving board off a database into a lake. And we animated it doing flips. And like it started kind of as like a joke, but it just like everyone loved it. So then for the conference, which we made a little bit of a pivot for this launch where we're like, let's make it all summer camp themed. We like doubled down, and like we're like, if we're gonna be a bear, be a grizzly. Let's break our colors. Let's just go straight into the summer camp theme. We have our CEO at on a panel with a scarf on wrapped around his neck like he's a Boy Scout with this duck on it, wearing it with absolute pride. Everyone on our team, everyone in the booth is wearing it like this. And it's like, you kind of have to know your own internal audience because like this is what's working, right? Like this is what has helped sales. This is what's helped the way we talk about things. Like people kind of wanted to have fun in this particular circumstance. And if I was more rigid, and if we were more rigid, we wouldn't have been able to identify and take advantage of this opportunity. Um, and that's an important thing to be flexible about, especially when you come to your C-suite, right? Like this is how they're going to be able to communicate the message better. Let's find a smart and clever way to do it.
I think that's such a good kind of mantra about brands in general because, as you said before, they're not really owned by even, at any given point. They can't. They're not necessarily owned by people. They're owned by movements. Sometimes they're owned
That's right.
by
That's a good way to
forces
put
that
it.
you can't necessarily control. But if you roll with them, and we've seen it, there's some high profile examples, on the consumer side of, things inadvertently taking off and then the brand teams being intelligent enough to roll with it and take it into new places and even incorporate it in some cases into the brand. So, I think that that's such a cool story because it shows that you guys are that way inclined, but it's amazing how little you see that in tech actually. And actually that's something I wanted to come on to, which is that, your category the data pipeline space. As you said, your thought leaders in it, you know, pioneers in it, but it's not like when we do a lot of work in cybersecurity. You know, that's a good example of where there's very much an industry standard of look, feel, comms, messaging, positioning, all that kind of stuff. You can go with it, and you may be a bit more familiar to your audience, but you're probably quite homogenous, or you can completely break away from it, and you can be seen as a bit pioneering, bit different, bit out there, but there is that risk that you maybe come across as too much of a maverick, or maybe you can find a bit of a balance. It's up to you, but that's where you are basically within an industry like cybersecurity. In a space that doesn't really have an industry standard, is that a good thing, or is it not necessarily such a good thing? Because there's, I suppose, a lack of expectation, and you have to kind of forge your own path, and it might work and it might not.
I mean, it depends who you ask. If you ask me, I think it's a fantastic thing. Like, the idea of forging your own path is everything I've lived for. Like, that's my favorite part of what I do for a living. You know, I think that we get the opportunity to define like a segment super, like, it's so fun. Like, it's so fun, right? Like, nothing's really off limits. There's no expectations yet. You can do what, in the example I just gave, like, you can kind of ride the wave and see where it goes. I similar to data security, security's backbone, right? And you need to come off as, there is a bit of a, like, you can't have fun, because having fun takes away from the amount of time you would be doing things that aren't fun, and we are not paying you to have fun, we're paying you to do things that aren't fun. And that's kind of like the security thing. We touch it, there's a little bit of that, but rather than like boiling it down to like fun, and I come back again to craft. Like, this has to feel well built, no matter what it is. If it's going to be funny, if it's going to be clever, it's going to be over the top, if it's going to be um, a diagram, like, this all has to feel like it was well built and intentional. That's the backbone of what I think we are instilling on our industry. And so that's my approach. And so as long as we have this like craftsmanship standard, the brand can really kind of go wherever we want it to. And that means that we just get to put a lot of time and effort into building great stuff. And I think putting a lot of time and effort and thoughtfully building great stuff is what this like kind of space is all about. I love finding new and interesting ways to do that. And that's like that's my favorite part of the job.
Yeah, somehow I thought that was going to be your answer, to be honest. I didn't for one
Yeah.
second think you'd think it'd be a bad thing, because there's any hesitation there. And if I may say, it really shows through, in the Fivetran brand from the outside. You really do get that sense. Very, very intentional, very well crafted. You know, I've been a real fan and admirer for a long, long time. Just on that, where does it go from here? If you can let us into any secrets, where does the Fivetran brand go from here? What's your kind of ambition for where you take it next?
Well, we have a lot of great customers that, like, B2B marketing, as you start to go up market, you start to tell the stories. We have to highlight those customers. And where we're going next right now is like, how do we do that in a really crafted way? Like I've been saying, Fivetran's a tool. You use it how you see fit. So in a way, Fivetran's an extension of your brand, and that's what we're playing with right now. You can see some of our older use cases that are use case videos that touched on that. Our JetBlue video, which I've always been really proud of, because we really were able to capture like the JetBlue brand through our brand, through the like, and that's our next kind of big milestone. Like, how can we really capture these other brands and do do them justice and show their stories and show how they're using Fivetran to do these incredible, like, just like, oh, wow, that's an interesting type of thing, um, story, and make it feel like it's their brand through the Fivetran lens. That's where we're going. It's going to be really fun. It's going to be partnership based. So that's what I'm really excited to do.
Nice. Just a point on going up market. So I was having a conversation with someone at Zapier, on the marketing team at Zapier, and Zapier has always been a little bit of an irreverent brand. And we were having this conversation around, going up market, more bigger, more enterprise target audiences and
Mm.
customers. And he was saying that, and I was saying, actually, what tends to happen with a lot of companies is you feel like, oh, it's enterprise. We need to just be a bit more buttoned down. We need to kind of take the weirdness out of it a little bit, lose some of that irreverence. We need to be a bit more sensible now. Um, and Zapier are like, no, we're going to dial it up because these are still human beings. Doesn't matter if you're at a company of 50 or a company of 5,000. To us, doesn't make a difference. We're still going to be Zapier. We're still going to be a little bit weird, a little bit quirky. Is that the stance you would take, or you will take at Fivetran? Not going to dial things down, dial it up.
Yeah, yes and no. Well, it's hard. I think if the moment, if we need to meet that moment, um, there's different ways that'll come to life, right? And I think that it's a little bit more of a clever, fun version of our brand. But like I've been saying, like, some of the in our space, enterprise is used like pretty synonymously with just like we need more money, and we're going to get it from the bigger logos. That's across the anyone you talk to, like, oh, we save you time and money. Like, let's save the biggest companies in the world time and money, and let's tell them how to do it and how we do that. Oh, let's make a landscape PDF like that. Like, that's like the solve. Um, we know their problems. We understand their problem intimately, and that's the most important thing we have to say. Now we can show that. We already know how to show that in the most basic, you know, landscape PDF, but how can we show that in a clever, well-built, well-crafted way? And that's really what I want to be able to do. Animations, illustrations, like being able to maybe get that voice and tone brand up there, but really, like, I want them to feel like these people have built something that solves my problem, and they've built it well, and now they're building the messaging really well. Okay, let's get on the call. That's my goal.
Yeah, nice. And I maybe should have prefaced that by saying that, I know that, goes without saying, every brand's different. Every brand approaches these things in different ways. What works for Zapier certainly doesn't work for other people. But I think what really comes through in this conversation with you is just this real focus on craft, as you say. If it looks well built, if you as a brand team and a creative team can bring that to life visually, verbally, in all the ways that you do, makes perfect sense. And that's why I've really enjoyed this conversation, actually, because anyone who goes and experiences anything Fivetran will see that straight away. And I urge you to, actually, because it will be evident as soon as you start to absorb and get immersed in the brand. So massive congrats to you, Vincent. And I really appreciate you taking time to be on the Changemakers. We've got to wrap it up now, but thank you
No
so
worries.
much. I know we've been talking about this for a while. I'm glad
Yeah,
it's happened before your amazing break, because you're going to some pretty incredible places in Europe and you might not want to come back. So it might have never happened. But thank you. I
it's
really appreciate
it.
your time.
I'm glad we did this. I'm really excited. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Pleasure. Thanks for being a guest on the Changemakers, Vincent. I hope a great rest of your day.
You too.